Okay, so this is the first mini lecture for chapter 21, where we're going to cover the immune system. When we're talking about the immune system, it's the whole function of this system is really to help provide resistance to disease, meaning we're trying to help fight off different microbes that our body's constantly being exposed to. When we're talking about the immune system, we have two major systems. We have our innate defense system and our adaptive defense system. The major difference between our innate and our adaptive defense system is specificity. So if we're talking about our innate defense system, it's non-specific. If we're talking about our adaptive defense system, it's very specific to what it can go in and help kill. Our innate defense system is broken up into two different lines of defense. So we have our first line of defense, which are things like our external membranes. So for example, our skin or our mucosal membranes. And then our second line of defense, which is going to include a lot of cells and different proteins that can come into play. So like antimicrobial proteins, phagocytic cells, and some other cells. But a hallmark that our second line of defense is actually in play is the presence of inflammation. So a lot of times our first line of defense is sufficient to ward off different microbes. But if we cut ourselves or we invade deeper tissues, then our second line of defense is going to have to come into play. So we have a first and second line of defense that make up our innate defense system, and then we consider our specific defense system or our adaptive defense system, the third line of defense, where we are attacking a particular foreign substance. Another difference between the innate and adaptive is innate defense system is very quick to respond. Everything is already there, ready to go. And again, it's non-specific, so it's not looking for a particular type of bacteria or fungi or something like that. It's just ready to kill any foreign invader. So really, really fast. Our adaptive or specific defense system takes a lot longer to react than our innate. So we really need our innate defense system to be powerful until we can get our adaptive immune system on scene. So even though we talk about our innate and adaptive defense systems separately, and we will in this chapter, I do want you to recognize that they do work together. So for example, both of these defense systems can release and recognize a lot of the same defensive molecules. Also, innate defense systems, which are considered non-specific, they do have specific pathways for certain substances, just not as specific. And then our innate responses can also release proteins, so they're going to help alert or activate our adaptive immune system to those foreign substances. So we can see over here, here's one division, that's our innate defenses. This is going to include our surface barriers, so our skin and mucosal membranes. That would be our first line of defense. And then our second line of defense would be proteins and cells and enzymes. So things like phagocytes, natural killer cells, inflammation, antimicrobial proteins, and fever. Our adaptive defense is considered our third line of defense, and we have two divisions. We have our humoral immunity, which includes our B cells, and then our cellular immunity, which is going to include our T cells. So, like I mentioned previously, the innate system uses the first and or second lines of defense to help stop attacks by pathogens. What is a pathogen? It's pretty much any disease-causing microorganism. So it could be a virus, bacteria, fungi, anything like that. So let's talk about the first line of defense of our innate immune system, and that would include our surface barriers. So we have two major surface barriers, our skin and our mucous membranes. We're not just talking about the membranes themselves, we're also including in this first line of defense the secretions. So the physical barrier is our skin and mucous membranes, but we also have things like keratin. And keratin is really important because it is resistant to weak acids and bases, so it's not destroyed and it's not harmed by those. It's also resistant to bacterial enzymes and to toxins. Mucosae provide similar mechanical barriers. So some of the things that our skin and mucous membranes can produce to help ward off these different microbes or pathogens One would be the presence of acidity. So our skin is slightly acidic, and some mucus secretions can also inhibit growth. So we collectively call the acidity of the skin and the mucus secretions the acid mantle. We also have some enzymes, so things like lysozyme that's present in our saliva, as well as the mucus in our respiratory system and our tears, so our lacrimal fluid. All of that can kill microorganisms. And if we're talking about our digestive system, we have enzymes in our stomach that can also help kill off microbes that reach it to that point. We also have mucin. So pretty much mucin is what we call it by itself, but when we dissolve it in water, it forms mucus. And we have this sticky mucus that lines both our digestive and our respiratory passageways. And the mucus is going to help trap a lot of these microbes. And we also have defensins. So defensins are basically antimicrobial peptides. These are really important because they're able to go in and poke holes into a bacterial cell membrane. If you poke holes into a bacterial membrane, it can no longer regulate its internal environment from its external environment, so it causes the bacteria to basically lyse and die. It's also really effective at helping control fungal colonization. And then we have some other chemicals, so things like lipids that are present in our sebum and dermacidin, which is in our sweat. Both of those are toxic to bacteria. So we do have some modifications present that can also help ward off different bacteria and microbes. So our respiratory system has modifications, one of which would be having mucus-coated hairs in our nose, and those are going to trap inhaled particles so that they don't reach our lungs. We also have cilia in our upper respiratory tract, and those can help sweep dust and bacteria and mucus back towards the mouth. And our surface barriers are pretty much, if they're breached by nicks or cuts, that's going to trigger the second line of defense that helps protect deeper tissues. So as long as we haven't cut or nicked ourselves, our first line of defense, just our membranes themselves, are sufficient. In the event that we've torn our barriers, so our skin or our mucous membranes, then we need our second line of defense to come into play.